Welcome back to Real Shift, where we like to talk real shit all day, every day, all for the love of movies. I am Joe. Before I get into it today, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Any little bit of feedback or support would be greatly appreciated. Without further ado, I'm going to get right into it because today I'm going to be talking about the news that came out that essentially confirms that the Snyder cut of Justice League that will be released next year on HBO Max. Well, Zack Snyder has apparently confirmed that this will in fact be a Elseworlds Tale. That's what it's being classified as. So basically, it's not part of the DCEU continuity, which I assume means that the Justice League, the original Justice League, or the first Justice League that was released to us, it was not the original, because technically the Snyder cut is the original, but the Justice League cut of the movie is still, I guess, canon, or still in the main continuity, so we're still following that timeline. There's a lot to unpack with that, and I'm going to do my best to articulate how exactly I feel. First and foremost, I think, in my personal opinion, any kind of comic book adaptation into a movie is an Elseworlds Tale to me. The way I look at it, and this is the way I've always looked at it, and I spoke about this in my X-Men 2000 video that I did a couple weeks ago, and basically it's that the real continuity for these characters is in the comics. Like, that is the characters' origins, the way that we know them, and I don't want to see that necessarily directly adapted to the screen. I want to see an interpretation of that, because when it comes to films, you have different directors and different writers, and they have different visions about where they want to take these characters, and I think they should be allowed free reign to do so. I think that's what Zack Snyder did, and that's part of the reason why people don't like his version of the characters, because it is, at times, a slight departure from what we know of them. And people don't know how to handle that necessarily. They want the exact characters that you see in the comics translated to the screen. And to me, that's just not the way to go. That's not interesting to me. I want to see a specific person's vision of what that character is. I want them to be able to be creative. I don't want them to have boundaries when they're trying to tell a story. And I think that's why I like Zack Snyder's DCEU movie so much, is because he did kind of take liberties at times, but also stayed faithful to the characters, in my personal opinion. And when it comes to what we got with the Justice League, I think, if anything, that was a major departure from the characters and the story they were trying to tell, and that's why that movie should be forgotten. In my personal opinion, that should be the Elseworlds Tale. That should be the tale that is long forgotten in a few years, and it probably will be long forgotten once the Snyder cut is released officially. But the way I see it, the way I'm going to approach this, is that this is the completion of Zack Snyder's trilogy, and that includes Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, and the Snyder cut of Justice League. That's how I'm always going to view it as a fan. Like, when I sit down to watch these movies, it's going to be a situation where it's like the Nolan trilogy or the Raimi trilogy or whatever the case may be. Like, these three movies, in my mind, go together because this was the original vision executed. Even if he never does another DCEU movie ever again, we'll always have this trilogy from moving forward. And that's why I don't necessarily understand why they are bringing up things like continuity and essentially trying to create this shared universe. And that leads me to my next point. I think a lot of this, to be quite honest, is Marvel's fault. And I know a lot of people are into the shared universe stuff and all that, and that's fine and dandy, but in my personal opinion, it's actually made it difficult for me to enjoy these movies, having shared universes, and I'll explain exactly why. Because I come from a time when you had people like Sam Raimi who got a 3-picture deal or whatever, or 2 pictures or whatever, and they talked him into the third one, whatever the case may be. But they have this plan, this 3-movie arc. I'll use Nolan, that's a better example, because even though he probably only intended to make one Batman movie, he eventually developed this 3-part arc for the character, and he was able to execute it, and he was able to do so without any restrictions, without having to tie it into any other properties. Like, it was just standalone movies. I long for the days when these characters got their own standalone trilogies or standalone series. When you try to incorporate all these different characters, you get a sense of, and this is the sense I get when I watch an MCU movie, and it's no offense to anyone who likes them, but when I watch an MCU movie, it just feels like the same movie being repeated over and over again. I know there's slight variations. I'm not saying they're exactly the same, but they spend so much time trying to fit everything together and trying to make sure that everything looks the same or make sure that everything feels the same. And I think they lose a bit of creativity in that process. They're not able to take these properties and do something new with them and do something fresh with them. Like, it's just a rehash of what they've already done because everything has to fit nicely into this little universe they created. And to be quite honest, I don't even necessarily think that they're perfect at that as people say they are. They've made their mistakes too, so it's never easy to do this, and I think you set yourself up a lot of times for mistakes and errors because you're going to miss stuff. There's a lot to incorporate there. So when you have something like Snyders Trilogy, and that's what I'm going to refer to it as, like, that to me is going to be this self-contained thing. No matter what happens with the DCEU, no matter what happens with DC period, that's its own thing. That's the Snyder Trilogy. Like, that's how I'm going to look at it, and I think a lot of people are going to look at it the same way. And it's just kind of unfortunate that we've got into this space where we need to classify what universe this is in, and every time they announce a new movie, whether it be the Joker movie from last year, and people were all confused because they're like, how does this fit into the DCEU? I don't understand. There already is a Joker. We have Jared Leto, blah, 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 blah. You get into these conversations, and it's just like, why does it matter? Who gives a shit? Like, I care less, to be quite honest, about continuity. I care more about just telling a single good story in the course of one movie. And that's what they should be focused on. They should be focused on taking these characters, like they did with Joker, and putting a fresh spin on them. And that movie was amazing, in my personal opinion. It was great. I loved everything about it. I think it's damn near a masterpiece, to be quite honest. And I think they should take more characters from comics and do stuff like that, because it opens up so much more as far as possibilities go. Like, I don't understand why you want to limit yourself and just make everything exactly like the comics, or just make everything to fit into this little shared universes. Like, shared universes, to me, are something that has actually ruined comic book movies, because that's become all the focus now. It's less about story. It's less about just doing the best you can in that moment. You're always constantly just trying to set up for something else. Like, it's like this never-ending thing. You got to have your end credit scene. You got to have this. You got to have that. It's never just about telling one self-contained story. I mean, think about it. The Dark Knight trilogy, we never had an end credit scene through the course of that, and that's because he was telling these self-contained stories that were all connected, obviously, because it's a trilogy, but each individual movie has its own story. Like, you can watch them each without watching them all together, if you understand what I'm saying. Like, you can watch The Dark Knight Rises without watching the two that came before it, because it's its own self-contained story. And I think that's just much more interesting than just constantly having this same repetitive formula that you regurgitate out every couple of months, or 2-3 times a year, however many times these movies come out. And that's just made the whole concept of comic book movies boring to me. And I think that is kind of where this is coming from, that Zack Snyder has to come out and basically explain to everyone where this movie fits in. Like, he shouldn't have to. Like, leave it up to the audience. I don't personally need anything spoon-fed to me. I don't need you to explain to me where this fits in and what universe this belongs in. Like, I can come up with that conclusion on my own. It's about how I interpret it anyway. It's about how the audience perceives it, not necessarily always about what you meant for. Like, you have so many movies that are interpreted and interpreted and interpreted these different ways. The Shining, for instance, is constantly being interpreted different ways by people, but we don't actually know necessarily what Stanley Kubrick wanted to do with that movie. It's his vision, he executed it, but it's left open to interpretation about how it all fits together. And people have ran with it. That's how movies should be. I can't stand it. Like, for the life of me, I cannot stand when things are just constantly spoon-fed to me. Like, allow me to, at least give me the opportunity to try to come to some conclusions by myself. Like, give me the benefit of the doubt. Don't treat me like an idiot when I'm watching these movies. And I encourage everyone to basically demand that movie studios just kind of stop insulting our intelligence and just basically, it's going to end up being more beneficial for us because we're going to get movies like Joker, we're going to get stuff like the Dark Knight Trilogy, we're going to get stuff like even Deadpool, for instance. Like, yes, it's part of the X-Men universe, but it's almost its own self-contained thing. And now we're not going to get that anymore because Disney has it, and they have to figure out how to fit it into the MCU, and they have to figure out how to make it R-rated, and there's just too many variables, and it's never going to work the same way as it did with the first two movies, which are pretty great. So that's just basically what I'm getting at, is like, I think we need to get away from all this explaining how these movies fit into these universes. Just make a good story. I could give two shits how it fits into the continuity, to be quite honest with you. Like, I am not ever worried about really timelines in a movie ever. Like, you can say what you want about the X-Men universe, and that was choppy timeline wise, whatever. Like, I love Days of Future Past. Yes, that reset the timeline, but there's still issues in that movie that like don't mesh with the other movies, but I don't care because it was a great movie. You understand what I'm saying? So I think that's what we need to get back to, and I think just the fact that Zack Snyder had to come out and explain this to people about where this movie fits in, I think is just kind of, I don't know, it's just unnecessary in my personal opinion. Like, I know he was just trying to appease people and just trying to probably appease Warner Brothers also, because they don't want to make it look like their first Justice League was a failure, even though it was. So he's trying to basically play nice, and I understand that. It's just I see people online constantly already just complaining about where this fits in, why they aren't doing things like Marvel and blah. Like, I don't want them to do things like Marvel. That's boring to me. Like, give me something different. I don't give a shit how it fits into these timelines or these universes. Just give me something creative and new and fresh, and take these characters and do something, put your own spin on them. That's basically all I want out of comic book movies anymore. If you're not doing that, then I honestly don't care. Like, that's just where I stand. So let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm looking forward to having a discussion with all of you. As always, please like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you next time right here on Real Shift. Thanks for watching. Peace out.